Willkommen, mystical American patriots. If you would like to help us keep up the metaphysical crusade against the kingdom of lies, please consider a small donation at either buymeacoffee.com/maps or patreon.com/mapsoc.
A new world order.
Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Once there was a pilgrim, he was lonely as a broom. He had the idea to build the moon. Started with an onion, and he let it dry, ring like a bell, and it made him cry. Then he covered it up with dust and dirt, and he made it hollow so it wouldn't hurt. Cut the ropes, and it came unwound, and it raised it up off the ground. Now the moon is hanging in the sky, shaking the oceans and moving the tide. And if his calculations was not true, then we might not be lonely, looking up at the moon. Somebody once asked the astronauts who built the moon, but they would not talk about the pilgrim and his lonely shell looking down on the earth all by himself. But they was really worried about his lonely bones. Said we can send a mission to bring him home. But by the time that the Apollo, it touched down, he was hiding in a hole under the ground. And now the moon is hanging in the sky, shaking the oceans and moving the tide. And if his calculations was not true, then we might not be lonely, looking up at the moon. And it covered it up with dust and dirt, made it hollow so it wouldn't hurt. And it cut the ropes, and it came unwound, and it raised it up off the ground. And the moon hanging in the sky, shaking the ocean and moving the tide. And if his calculations were not true, then we might not be lonely, looking up at the moon. Good morning, everybody. Actually, good evening. Hello.
Hello.
Nighttime show.
It's a nighttime show.
Nighttime show.
We're
Different
recording
energy.
on a Saturday night. Yeah, way different.
Exactly.
So I don't know how that's going to affect the vibe of the show.
Well, I have a cream soda.
Sweet.
That's good. And I just had, my family's adopted the tradition of every Friday night We watch a movie and eat various, like a meat, cheese, and fruit platter from a big board.
Oh yeah, charcuterie.
Charcuterie, which I think is the same as a smorgasbord. I think charcuterie's fancy French and smorgas is German, but I think it's the same idea.
Yeah, something
Isn't
like
it?
that.
I may be
maybe
wrong.
Swedish.
Yeah, it sounds Swedish. Smorgas. Smorgas.
Smorger.
Yeah, so we did that, which is a good thing. We were watching March of the Penguins,
Beautiful.
which is a good movie, but the kids are being introduced to like the savageries of nature in that movie.
Yeah.
Like every 15 minutes, a little pretty penguin dies.
Well, it's better
So-
than they learn about it from you than on the street.
That's right. Well, they have to, when we start slaughtering the rabbits in the basement,
That's right.
they're going to be prepared.
Sweet.
Art Bell did his show at nighttime.
Well, I can already. I feel kind of pumped up right now.
I know it's better at night. See, usually it's in the, but Art Bell always did his. He would always be like, "Coming to you from the high desert."
That's right. Yeah, I remember.
3 a.m. or whatever. Great. I was listening to some of his old shows over the week, and it still is great. There's something about 90s radio that just is forever young.
The 90s were a magical time, at least to me.
The people were happy.
Yeah.
They were not overly worried. The Cold War had just ended, and so that was a big relief.
Oh, yeah.
They hadn't yet entered the age of terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
The computers were there, but they weren't overbearing.
Right.
And it was just they had a lovely time of it, and brings back a lot of nostalgia.
We should go back.
Fashion wasn't very good though.
I'll take it.
That was awful.
I mean, on balance.
On balance, all things considered, it's better, but man, was it loud. As far as the fabrics. When I think of like 90s fashion, I just think of Will Smith in a jumpsuit, like a neon jumpsuit.
Like crushed denim.
Yeah.
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 Jorts.
Jorts. I still have a pair of jorts. Every now and then I break them out.
That doesn't at all surprise me.
I have a pair of jorts. They're not cutoff jorts, but I don't. It's hard to imagine a time when you could return to like cut off denim shorts, blue jean shorts being just a thing that guys would wear.
I had a dirt bike in the 90s, and I would bomb around the neighborhood with no helmet on in my jorts. And go to my friend's house, and I'd drive up in his yard and cut through the grass with my dirt bike. Try to impress the girls that were hanging out there. Yeah, it was great.
Right.
They weren't ever really impressed, but I tried.
Yeah, it's hard to be. And it was good. The 90s, I listened to 90s radio. Something about it is just different. There was still, you could have cassette tapes. Because, I've mentioned this in the show before. I'm a vintage analog file.
Oh, sure.
A vintage tech file. Retro tech, retro futurist. I like, anything. Sort of like being Amish, but with electronics. Where you just sort of pick an arbitrary point in history and say, no more.
Yeah. Well, everybody's got their lines, so they got to draw.
I hope to one day record this show over ham radio.
Let's do it.
But I'm not. I think it's technically illegal.
Oh.
I know people that do ham radio, and like you can't broadcast music over it. You can't. I'm pretty sure you can't use it to broadcast a radio show, like a program.
Well, we're in sort of
you're
a
not supposed to hog the
post-law
bandwidth.
world, like the law doesn't really matter now. So I think we should just do it. We'll do it at the Georgia
That's true.
Guidestones, dude, or at least one of us will be there.
That's true. Well, Greg Bishop, who I've mentioned on the show before, who's I'm a big fan of. He in the 90s and 80s ran pirate radio stations.
We need to get back to that.
Yeah, which if you don't know is you just set up a radio broadcasting transmitter, like somewhere in the hills, and then you just start sending out your show
without
any licensing,
no license,
and you're so close that the people that want to tune in to like CNN or whatever can't. They just hear you blasting about UFOs in the desert or whatever.
Yeah, this was
a
real
thing.
thing.
Complain.
This was awesome.
Yeah, it was great, but he got slammed a couple of times for that by the law, but he pursued. He carried on. He persisted.
There you go.
That song I played didn't have anything to do with anything we're talking about today. I just like it.
It was a bopping song. Did you write that, or what's that from?
No. Who Built the Moon? It's by Shiny Ribs. He's a good guy.
It was cool, man.
Yeah, he's out of Texas. He's in a genre called swamp funk. I don't know if many people are familiar with swamp funk.
Oh, that I love it already.
Yeah, he's the only person I've ever seen listed under the genre swamp funk.
Okay.
But every time I look him up, it's like swamp funk, and then it's like he's like the only one. And you look at him, and he looks like a guy that is from a swamp. He looks like a Louisiana swamper that just sits around and. But it's good. He has a lot of good stuff. It's poor people music, you know.
Were you with me that time down in the Everglades when we busted into that swamp trapper convention?
No, you told me about it, but I wasn't there.
It was great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had swamp funk going on there, but it was more of an odor than it was a music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The swamp people of the Everglades are something else.
They thought we were something else.
Well, that's probably true. They probably had culture shock the reverse way.
Yeah.
But if you never, the Everglades, the Everglades is what's special about the Everglades?
Tell me about it.
It's the place in the United States, and actually on the North American continent, that receives the most lightning strikes per year. By a wide margin.
Really?
Yeah, most lightning strikes. All the water, just...
A lot of moisture.
It's also one of the places where you can find, if you hike around there, you got black bears, you got panthers, and you've got alligators.
That's a lot of things that'll kill you. Yeah.
Yeah, and big snakes.
It's like wet Australia.
It's like wet Australia. That's right. It's like wet Australia. Of course, crocodiles are much worse than alligators.
Sure.
They're bigger and they're much more aggressive. Alligators are pretty chill. I don't know if you've ever ran into an alligator in the wild.
But the alligators
in the wild are pretty lazy.
Yeah.
They just sort of hang out, and they only really move around when they're hungry. Crocodiles will actively just come get you just to be mean. So, yeah, I don't know. Did you have a good week?
It was pretty good.
Besides all the stuff.
Well,
besides like the coup and the breakdown of the
you can't
the
really let that stuff
Republic
bring you down.
You can't. Exactly.
In all truth, I was a little kind of bummed out this week. Really the COVID stuff, the isolation, and, me and my friends are all quarantined and all this stupid crap. I was really bummed out. And then, like 3 friends came to visit me today out of the blue and just hang out.
See?
And it was just really nice. I was like, it's going to be okay.
Were you quarantined because you were exposed to the corona?
Yeah, quote unquote exposed. Like, what does that even mean anymore? I don't know.
Yeah, it's like everyone. I just never took any test of any kind.
Yeah, I haven't taken one either. Proud to say.
Or, and I sort of told people around me. I said, I don't want to hear about your test. Don't tell me. Don't tell me about your test.
Don't ask, don't tell. I love it.
Don't tell me. Don't ask, don't tell about your dumb test.
I'm gonna let all my friends know if you get the Rona, don't tell me about it.
The corona has, before we get into what we're gonna talk, the corona has made me rethink about fundamentals of medicine, and this is probably all wrong.
Okay.
Granted.
Mm-hmm.
But I have been seriously reconsidering viruses because I was thinking about it and I was like, I was trying to figure out why all the models are consistently wrong. Because the models for bacterial infection that epidemiologists roll out track pretty well with what tends to happen, right? Mm-hmm. But all the big high-profile ones Zika virus was a few years ago, the Ebola, the Corona, AIDS, they all have these predicted patterns that never play out. They miss by a pretty wide margin.
Yeah, that's true.
In every by this time, Africa was supposed to be just AIDS. They were all saying, look, Africa's AIDS now. It's AIDS and hyenas, and that's it, right?
Oh, man.
But that didn't happen, and there is AIDS in Africa, sure. There's HIV, but it's not overcome with HIV.
Right.
And it doesn't appear to be because of any behavioral changes of the locals, right? Because to their great credit, most of the time when Western countries suggest something for Africa, they say, screw off.
Yeah. It's really the best answer.
It's the best answer because they've been screwed over enough by Western countries that they're just done with it.
Yeah.
Like they kicked Bill Gates out of there so fast. Like just get out of here. And just do with your stupid medicine and wanting to block out the sun.
What a jerk.
Go away.
That guy.
Yeah. The African countries are really firing on all cylinders lately. I've been enjoying watching their response. So the AIDS didn't work there. It didn't work here like they said it was going to work. They said everyone's going to have AIDS and no one had it, despite more people having casual sex than ever with multiple partners.
Well, Sumo and I are old enough to remember the original AIDS crisis. We were youngins. Yeah, we were pretty young, but I personally remember the hysterical news reportage about all that, and thinking like, maybe we're not even going to be able to reproduce anymore because everybody's going to have AIDS. I mean, it really was that level. They were freaking like this could be the end of humankind because you can either make babies or not get AIDS. Like those are the two choices of the future. For sure, that was what it. And also, like, no one could ever get blood anymore because if you had a blood transfusion, you were going to get AIDS. Oh yeah. And Fauci was all up in this. BT Dubs. Just saying.
Yeah,
he was all up in this nonsense.
So I've been wondering, like, well, what can account for this? And like I said the other, like, I really am beginning to wonder if viruses even behave like they think, because I was digging into it, and no one. There's this idea, and what they say is the virus attaches, and then it has little projectiles of some kind, and different viruses have different attachment points, right? Not necessarily like little spikes, but something. And then it injects its material into the DNA, and then the cell replicates the DNA when it divides, and that's how and so on. But then I was thinking, first of all, I realized that's never actually been observed to happen, which is a big hole in my opinion. Like you can see bacteria divide. But, to my knowledge, and I looked pretty hard, I might be missing something. I looked for viruses entering a cell video, Has anyone? And you get a few electron microscope pictures of viruses near a cell,
right?
That appear to be attached, okay, or stuck together. But that's it. You don't get this you can't see the injection of DNA. You can't see it doesn't. I mean, and that's not their fault. It's just I don't. Again, I might be wrong about this, but I don't think people have electron microscopy video yet.
Yeah,
right.
And there's just let's acknowledge the fact that there are limits to what we can know and observe. Right. Well, with a high degree of accuracy.
And then I was like, well, but you realize the real kicker for me was I was thinking about. I was like, well, viruses are actually inanimate objects.
Yeah, they're like little gadgets.
They can't move on their own. Like, how are they doing? One, they can't move on their own. They can't reproduce. Like, they're not alive. Right? They're not. They don't fit the definitions of. So, they have no mobility. Like, are they?
Right. They have no metabolism.
I question whether the mechanisms where they base their models on are even correct. And, of course,
I feel like that's reasonable. Yeah.
I mean, because to me, if you consistently have a model that says a virus will do this and it doesn't, then you need to say something is off.
Well, that would require humility and thoughtfulness.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it works pretty good for bacterial infections and even for fungal infections because I think because those things are alive.
Yep.
For sure. But viruses, I don't know. I don't want to get too because we're gonna get in it. So I want to finish up talking about Q and the state of Q. Who was Q? What was the purpose of Q?
Okay.
And all that stuff.
All right, cool.
Because I know you had some theories about who Q may have been.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. Right, yeah.
And, because Q was, and I think, frankly, it's still going to be going forward, like a big cultural thing. Because, when prophecies fail in cults, the cults do shed a lot of members, but the remaining ones just galvanize and double down harder.
Yep.
Which is a well-known phenomenon in religious sects and cults. Like when the religious leader makes a prophecy and it doesn't come true, you lose like 80% of the members, but the remaining 20% just double down harder, and that makes more sort of like an infection. You know, you kill the 99 germs, and then the one that's left gets all the strong one that's left gets all the room to reproduce.
Right.
And so then, there are people that have gone so far down this rabbit hole of their leader that they can't get back out.
Right. Well, but don't you think, like, as a phenomenon, cultural phenomenon, it's kind of wrapping up? Because, like, there may be a few hundred, maybe a few thousand people that are still following this, but are they going to matter going forward?
Well, yes and no. The mindset of Q is going to stick around.
Okay.
Like, all the Q posts, I think, are going to be like, what was that? Mm-hmm. But this, like, what happened over like 3 years or 4 years, it trained like millions of people to be hyper focused on minutia in media.
Yeah.
And like to the point where when Donald Trump was like doing his hands, they're like, look, he just Morse coded Q.
Yeah.
Long, short, long, or whatever. When he's pointing with his hand. And then like that mindset is still going to be there. And people are going to be seeing, it's pareidolia, like seeing faces everywhere, you know?
Yeah, sure.
On a massive scale.
Mm-hmm.
People are just going to be seeing signs and portents all over the place. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think it's going to happen.
Right.
You know, so I think that Q mindset is in a lot of people, and they're going to carry that forward to the next thing. And the next thing may not come around for a while, but when it does, you're going to be like, these are the descendants of Q. See, I think that's what it's going to feel like.
Just as a little aside, do you think that the Q thing was sort of Taoist in nature, where, you know, the Wheel of Tao is sort of like the plan, and then, you know, checking for codes in videos is sort of like reading tea leaves or consulting the
Tao Te Ching,
yeah, that one.
Sort of like
it seems kind of. I mean, the entirety of my knowledge of Taoism comes from reading Philip K. Dick, you know, but but still, it just sort of had that flavor to me.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I'm not sure that's good or bad. Well, first of all, if you want to know about Taoism, you can read, of course, Lao Tzu, who is the best on Taoism because he was the founder of Taoism, more or less. Mm-hmm. You can read Lao Tzu, or you can also read the Tao of Pooh, as in Pooh Bear.
Oh, that's funny.
Because someone wrote the Tao. Because Pooh Bear, he was this Taoist, and he realized that Pooh Bear does live his life in a very Taoist way. Like if he's sleepy, he just falls asleep wherever he is. Mm-hmm. He's hungry, he just eats wherever he is.
Yep.
He's just going with the flow of the yin and the yang, you know?
Okay.
So there was 2 books, The Tao of Pooh and The Tay of Piglet.
That doesn't sound as paranoid as the Philip K. Dick version of Taoism.
Right. No, I don't think it is.
Okay.
But they're good. I mean, that's the best pop culture introduction to Taoism in the English language. But not that Lao Tzu is inaccessible. Lao Tzu didn't write very much. You know, the great Tao flows everywhere, to the left and to the right. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And when merits are accomplished, it lays no claim. You know.
So maybe Q has more to do with PKD than it does with Lao Tzu.
Yeah, maybe. I like Taoism. Taoism to me, if you don't believe in like revelation from God, right? If you don't think that he's ever had a prophet or a messiah or someone that could speak for him, if he's never left like a scriptural book, then Taoism, if you don't believe that's possible, Taoism is the most logical religion, because it's like, look, there's good things and there's bad things, and they exist in balance, and everything goes in cycles, because the year goes in cycles, the life goes in cycles, death goes in cycles, and it's all, you know, up and down, and yin and yang, and it's a very deep philosophy about how to live your life, and I think it is it's very, very similar to the Greek idea of logos.
Okay.
As it was originally presented. I mean, in fact, so much so that Chinese translations of the Bible, when it says in the beginning, in English we say it was in the beginning was the logos in the Greek, and then in English we say in the beginning was the word, and in Chinese they say in the beginning was the Tao.
Interesting.
So there's a great book called Christ the Eternal Tao, written by a Eastern monk who he rolls off. Then he says, if you really want to do it from a Chinese, if instead of using like Aristotle as your base to explain metaphysics, if you use Lao Tzu, then what you would say is that Jesus is the incarnation of the Tao.
Interesting.
Right, which would be the same. So it's very good, and so maybe it's Taoist. I think it's more Philip K. Dicky.
Okay.
And really more schizophrenic than anything. I mean, I enjoy it. Was like I said, I spent the last week of the thing in it. It was fun. I had a great time. Everyone was very nice. They were like cosmic consciousness, my brother. Peace and love. We're gonna ascend to the fifth dimension. I don't know what any of that means, but it sounded great.
Sure.
And I, like I said, I talked with a guy named Billy Don I Am, who he got banned. Press F for respects. And it was just a good time. I think there was a lot of people that were just in it because it was a community.
Sure.
Which is the draw of a lot of cults, because people are so isolated. If you're just like, hey, we're gonna get together and do some stuff, people are like, this is great, and we gotta also eat monkey brains. Yeah, well, I guess that's not too bad. I mean, if we get to play badminton on Tuesdays, eat some monkey brains. And that's how you found the cult, just FYI. You do a lot of fun stuff, and then a couple of weird things that really hook them in,
Right.
Because they've got this shared trauma of, like, cracking open a monkey skull.
It's like joining a fraternity.
Right. Yeah, this is why groups have ritual initiations. You have a shared trauma. Not necessarily a trauma, but a shared history of some kind.
A shared secret.
A shared secret, a shared something, and it binds people together. It's very effective, but man, what a rough week to be Q people.
Yeah, hurting.
I felt bad for them. I was reading all the Q people reacting when Biden was elected, and they were like, "None of this was real, and I'm the laughing stock of my family."
Yeah,
it's over. There was nothing, no plan, no Q, no nothing. I was just like, ugh. Imagine putting all your energy into something that doesn't even exist. 4 years of trusting the plan, and not only is there no plan, there's probably no Q.
Yeah. Well, no, like, there is a Q somewhere, but
is it the same guy, or was it just?
It's probably a room full of nerds in Virginia somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like my personal favorite theory is my personal favorite theory is that it was just a troll that got out of hand. Because people do that on like 4chan every day.
Yeah.
They get on there and they're like, I'm an FBI agent and I'm disclosing secret information about the arrest of Bin Laden. Bin Laden's not dead. He's actually alive and working in the Pentagon or something. And 99% of them are crap. Right? But like every now and then, one of them turns out to be true, and it feeds there was one a couple years ago. This lady, she posted on 4chan. She was like, "I'm being held captive by the Taliban. Please help me. Here are my coordinates. This is when I was captured. Please send help. Tell somebody." And because she was given access to the computer, it turned out. She was given access to a computer for like recreation, but they had like blocked basically everything, like chats and emails, and she could watch like YouTube but couldn't comment and stuff. But the guard that watched her primarily apparently liked to browse 4chan, because of course he did. And he forgot to reblock that one day when he gave her the computer, and she was like, 4chan, and I'll just leave a post on the 4chan that says that where I am. And so she got on there and she's like, they torture me, they've raped me, and I'm in this place, I need help, please. And she had this very detailed thing, like, here's how you can find me. And then all the comments under are just like, fake, gay, fake, gay. And it turned out to be real, which made the whole thing just... Imagine that woman sitting there, and she just typed out this impassioned plea for help, being tortured by the Taliban in a cave. And everyone's just like, fake.
That's the internet.
And she's like, oh, no, I finally got my message, and everyone's just calling me gay and fake.
So did they rescue her?
Eventually, she got out for some reason. I don't think anyone... I think just randomly, the Taliban fled because someone was coming through, and they left her, and she got out. So I forget the whole exact story. But then she told them, she was like, that was real! And they're like, well, whatever, you know.
Should have picked another forum to post on.
You should have picked I mean, I know all you had access to was 4chan.
This is really your fault, lady.
This is really your fault, but... yeah, so I don't know. I mean, maybe that was Q. But yeah, imagine you put that much trust in your life in something that doesn't exist. I mean, we don't have to imagine it. I mean, I know what it feels because I do Bitcoin sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that's not real.
No.
It sort of works. It's just like, haha, poof, $5,000 into existence, and then woo, it's gone again. Oh, well. Yeah, I mean, they did that this week with GameStop. You seen that?
Oh, yeah, that was a riot, man.
People on Reddit are awful, but sometimes they do something interesting once in a blue moon. And they decided they have the Robinhood app, you know, where you invest.
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, what if we just all bought GameStop and made it go up and up and up? And they're like, that's a good idea. Let's just all purchase GameStop. This company that still is a brick and mortar store selling physical copies of video games in an age when everyone just downloads them and can't leave their house.
Yep.
And so they took the price of GameStop, which is on its way to being a Blockbuster scenario, from like $1 to like $60. So over the course of like, and I got in on that, but I didn't know about the Reddit thing. I just thought it was going up, and I was like, well, I don't understand it, but I'm gonna buy some. Which is what I always do. I have never understood the fundamentals for any stock or investment I've ever made.
That may be the secret to successful investing.
It really is, because people are talking and they're like, you know, you got to do this and you got to do this, and you just go,
line go up.
Line go up. Yeah. You buy it when line go up. You sell it when lines start going down.
Yep.
And that's the whole. that's the and it just and the people like all the financial experts and the advisors and the stock market people and all the boomers with 401ks, they were freaking out about the GameStop thing because they're like, this is market manipulation and I can't do it because it's just showing how farcical it is.
Yeah, they're just mad because the plebs are doing it. That's the crap they do every day, man.
Yes, that's what they do every day. And it's like, is it even market manipulation? Like, why is it manipulating the market to just decide that we'll all buy something for no reason? That's what everyone does all the time. Every purchase in America is for almost no reason.
Yeah, man.
You know? Most of what we buy has no purpose. We just do it.
Reddit went and pulled down the investor class's pants in front of the whole school. And I'm proud of them for it.
Yeah, they did, because it's like this. It's like showing, hey, this is all just a big stupid game.
Yeah.
And they've been treating it so seriously, like, the GDP and and people are like, what if we just all purchase this crap stock and make it go to the moon? And then we all sell at the same time or something. Like, that's a great idea.
Yeah, there's not really a good community way to unwind that, because then it's like prisoner's dilemma.
It's like a prisoner. Exactly. It's like, who's going to sell first, but you want to ride it up, right?
Right.
And then, so for people that are of the mind to just gamble, because people that don't have any money will gamble, which is the rational thing to do. Like, people are always like, poor people don't understand math, and that's why they buy the lottery. It's like, no. If you're making like $7 an hour, there's no point to save money.
Right.
Because you never can save up enough to matter. You get wiped out with like one car repair. Right? It never so the best investment you can do is just buy a lotto ticket or go to the casinos. And that's the best. That's because you might win, and that would be good, because if you lose $50, it's not going to make any long-term difference. If you make $5,000 or $50,000, it can make a difference, right? So the poor people aren't dumb. They're doing what's rational based on their income.
Yeah.
And Yeah, so people are just. That's one thing. I think the end of America will be financial. Because as people realize what a big nonsense it is, it starts to come unraveled. It's like an apocalypse. Well, that's what an apocalypse is, really. We've had an apocalypse not the apocalypse, but we've had an apocalypse.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Which I mean, apocalypse,
many of them. Yeah.
Yeah, apocalypse just is Greek for unveiling.
Like the Q people had an apocalypse on the 20th.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Right, where they were unveiled. It's like, oh, is there anyone behind the curtain? No, there's not. Not even a little man.
Well, no, I think we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity here for all.
Well, you think there is someone behind the curtain, and you think we should find him? Yeah.
Yes. So the Q people who have had their lives turned upside down, alienated from their families, probably maybe lost some money. Some of them lost their job. Whatever. It's been a nightmare for them.
Some of them went to prison for storming the Capitol, dressed like a horned god.
Right. So but that group has a lot of analytical horsepower. Okay.
They do.
They're highly motivated. They're very effectively networked. They could build an open source private intelligence agency and start tracking down the people that ran the QCon and get revenge.
Like a decentralized, Bitcoinized intelligence agency.
Yep.
They could.
Yep. They could set up, they get on Urbit. They could set up like a GoFundMe for certain intelligence operations. And the whole goal of this whole thing, and they can fund each other and support each other. And the whole goal of this whole thing will be to find who did this to them and make them pay. Yes.
By the way, $1 million idea. I'm not gonna do it because I'm not good at programming. I can do general scripts or whatever. But if someone set up a GoFundMe with cryptos and just have lots of money.
It's probably already out there.
I looked around. I didn't see anything good. Just try.
Okay.
Try, because you can set up things in like Bitcoin, whatever, in escrow.
So let's build a private one for the Q people, and you got to pass some sort of loyalty test to get in, and it's going to cost you like $50 a month to be a part of this network, and then the funds go to intelligence operations to find out who did this. And to get him. And get him.
And figure out who was...
I mean, this will be like, what a great chapter 2 of the Q saga is the revenge. Right? The reckoning.
Q the revenge.
Q2 the reckoning. I'm just saying, Q people, you've got an opportunity here to do something really cool.
Yeah. I mean, what if it is just one dude and he's just been making up stuff? I think, because if it is one guy, I think at some point he started buying into his own nonsense. I think I think a couple of the things he said sort of turned out to be true, and he's like, I'm a prophet.
It's possible.
And then he just started going with it, and he believed his own guy. He was like that guy. Who was the guy that kept saying Jesus was coming back? Harold Camping? Was that him? And he really believed that he'd figured out like a secret numerological code in Revelations.
Well, he did by the end, but I really think that when people go nutso like that, at some point they make a conscious choice to do it. There's a moment of decision where one says, I'm going to depart from reality and do this other thing. And I'm not quick to excuse their culpability.
I don't know. I've danced on the edge of crazy, and I could see how.
But you didn't. You made the decision not to go in.
Well, yes, but if I was a little more unstable as a person, like if my life was more chaotic, if I was a bit more, I could see how I could slide down it and think that it was. Because I watched Harold Camping after his prophecies didn't come true, and he seemed generally like confused and sad.
He did. I remember that. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, there was that song about him Nickel Creek did. It's time to bid this old world goodbye. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, glory, time to fly away. We'll meet our Savior in the sky. Hallelujah, the 21st of May. And then it's, well, I never been so short. Boom, boom, boom. Ain't never led no one astray. Except in the fall of 94, but hallelujah. So he'd already done it once in the fall of 94. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
Like, I never let no one say except in the fall of 94, but hallelujah, the 21st of May. You know? So I don't know. And yeah, I don't know. But so maybe they're, maybe it's one guy. Maybe he's deluded. Maybe it started as one guy. You had an idea that it was Pompeo.
Yeah, I think it could be Pompeo because he's the only one that didn't like openly betray Trump in the critical moment.
Right.
You know, everybody else did, but he seemed to sort of stand by him in his own way. But I think that kind of leaves he's the only guy left that could have been running the Q thing. So it could have been Pompeo. It also could have been British intelligence.
It's true
because they were all up in the PP tape, the Russian wee dossier. So,
and as we've discussed on the show, they manufactured a fake map of Hitler's plans of invasions for South America that got America into the war. So they do this stuff.
They mess with America. British intelligence has messed with America many times.
And you know what? The great sins of the British are why they're so ugly.
Yes, indeed.
They wear their dishonor on their face and in their messed up teeth.
Right. So really, I think that's my main Q theory right now is that it's British intelligence.
And
it's because Q, the guy from the James Bond movies,
James Bond.
Which at first I thought, it can't be British intelligence because that would be a little too on the nose to call themselves Q.
But they hide it in plain sight. See.
But yeah, it was like a double reverso.
It's like, well, it couldn't be them because it'd be like, oh, we're MI6, wink, wink, and they're like, oh, that means they're not really, but then they really are, right? They tell you, and then that makes you think that they're just joshing.
So that's the first hint for the disillusioned Q, now private intelligence operation. Start looking at the British. Let's
take a moment to appreciate what a weird position Donald Trump must have been in, because people are like, why didn't you do this or that? It's like, but just imagine for a second, you're there, right? The election's fraudulent, and you're like, okay, what? And I got and for 4 years you got people attacking you, coming at you with all sorts of conspiracy theories. Like, okay, all right. Where are my supporters? All right, here's my supporters. What are they doing? UFOs underground, and they're eating the children in Parliament, and they've got lizard people. He said, whoa, okay. I don't know what to do with what? And he just has to pretend like he doesn't know what Q is.
He's like, I'm just going to back away from this whole thing slowly. I'm going to go play golf.
That's why he was playing so much golf. He's like, what the hell? On one side, I got people that just hate me and just make. On the other side, my supporters are just batshit insane. And they're just screaming about aliens and underground bases and save the children. And man. Nancy Pelosi is feasting on orphans in the Senate chamber, and there's underground tunnels in Switzerland, and at one point there was like 40,000 Chinese on the border of Ontario or something. And he was like, I don't know what to do with those people.
Yeah.
And it would have been a hard position for anyone to be in.
True that.
So I know, I don't know. Being a president is hard. And also being a president when half the country hates you and the side that supports you, half of them are mentally unstable because they just found out about Jeffrey Epstein and have fallen apart inside.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing, because it's like there's enough truth in the Q. Like a lot of the elites, quote unquote elites, are pedophiles. We know this. They run rings. It's very, very bad. It's in the Catholic Church. It's in a lot of the CEOs. The people didn't go to the Jeffrey Epstein temple for no reason.
Yep.
The British royal family is involved in it, and everyone knows that, right? They had I forget the guy's name, but there was a British Jeffrey Epstein years ago who was knighted, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, that guy. I know who you're talking about.
Prince Andrew and Epstein they're right that like that core of it is right, but then they're like, they just go a little too far. They got a little too excited.
So, question.
Yeah.
Did the Jeffrey Epstein thing get blown wide open in order to break people's minds?
I don't know. See, that's the sort of things I wonder about, because that requires a high. That's like real 4D chess.
Yeah.
And when you read the intelligence operations of people in the past, they're clever, but they're not brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, do you ever read Operation Mincemeat?
No.
All right, Operation Mincemeat was a World War II ploy to fool the Germans and the Axis forces about where the D-Day invasion would be.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew sort of that it was going to be somewhere around Normandy, right? Because they had intelligence and they could see people massing and like scouting out the area. And so they were going to heavily fortify that to keep the invasion from working. So what they did was they got a dead soldier, a dead American, and they had in a battle, they purposely crashed a plane or a boat, I don't remember, and to where the body of this soldier would wash up on the shore with wearing like officer's clothing. And inside of this guy's was like laminated plans for for a fake D-Day invasion. Oh,
okay.
And it's called mincemeat because this guy, his corpse got all shot up and whatever. But and the most clever thing about it was they had like a radio transmitter on this guy or something. And the way they kept the Germans from finding it is they put it in the buttons of the guy's coat, but they reversed the threads. Or something weird. Like, if the Germans were trying to, like, I don't know why they would think to unscrew the buttons. But if they did, they go, oh, the lefty is the loosey. Oh, it is still tight. It is not a screw.
Oh, right? Okay.
Because they did lefty tighty and righty loosey.
Right.
And that's
okay.
And I read that, I was like, what? Like, that's your, and that was but it seemed to work because they did this on a couple of different corpses. Like they would have people watch, and they'd have these plans, and they would leave all these other signals to convince them they were going to come up basically from Africa into Spain, more or less. If I remember correctly, or maybe it was Italy. But one of the two, Spain, Italy, same. So the Axis redirected a lot of their forces towards those places and left Normandy more exposed, and it worked. So that's a clever move, but it's not like, okay, now we're going to expose the pedophile ring so that some people then think that we have contacted the Palladians and that Hillary Clinton is in communion with them to make underground tunnels.
Okay.
That's like a several steps unpredictable.
Right.
You know?
So it's more like things happen and they're just good at using things to their advantage.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, like and so that kind of Yuri
Bezmenov.
Is it Bezmenov?
Yeah.
I always get him and Yuri Geller confused. Yuri Geller was the guy that bent the spoons. Right?
Yeah. I don't think Bezmenov could bend spoons
with his mind.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, Yuri Bezmenov, he would actively describe, intelligence is only like 15% trying to fool the other people or gather. He said it's mostly quote unquote active measures where you try to get in there and like sow disinformation,
right,
just to confuse the people. And so that's. By the way, CIA, if you're listening, and you probably are, me and Smokestack would be great assets.
Well, I didn't
for spreading disinformation to the Ruskies.
To the Ruskies.
You can point them to because I don't know.
Wait, are we talking to the good guys in CIA or bad guys in CIA?
I just want to put on my resume CIA asset. I don't want to be an agent, and I don't. And listen, I'm not.
So we're only going to do those missions that don't like totally corrupt our soul.
I just want to spread disinformation somehow.
Okay. Well, I think that's kind of this podcast, but
I mean, see what I'm doing is I'm spreading this seed in our listeners for future references that maybe I am spreading disinformation.
I wonder if any of our listeners are in the CIA.
I hope so.
I think Chad Wolf might be.
He may be. I was gonna apply at the CIA, and then it sounded really boring.
Well, I think most guys just end up being pencil pushers.
Yeah, everyone's a pencil pusher. People are like, I'm gonna join the Marines, and they're like, PowerPoints.
Yeah. Flowcharts.
That's what it is. Flowcharts and prepare the Apache helicopter.
Yeah.
Most everyone I knew in the Marines just went to work and like repaired something or pushed emails.
Really? Now we know one guy that really did the fighting.
That's true, but there's such a small minority of the whole military force.
That's true. Yeah.
The military force is a bloated jobs program.
True.
It's just a way to take because they don't want to have this giant underclass of poor people. And so they say, well, if you join the military, then we'll send you around. And yes, we may send you to get exploded, but you have health care and blah, 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 you know. So there's that. But yeah, it was an apocalypse because that just means like unveiling. Like it's just like, oh, this wasn't real. And also, what else happened? We realized elections aren't real. A lot of people just woke up to that. Now, we've known that for a while.
Mm-hmm.
We've known that elections are screwed with all the time.
But, you know, even
in
though
basically
I knew
every country.
It was, the wound still felt fresh.
Yeah, because it's so in your face.
Because it was just so in your face. It still was bitter. It was just bitter to watch. But I don't think I had it as bad as some other people did. I've seen some people go through some serious, like, total worldview collapse with regard to the integrity of the republic.
Well, that's rough. Why we're a worldview. We first billed ourselves as a worldview repair service, and that's still what we are.
We're here for you guys.
We're here for you. Yeah, but you just think of it this way. Throughout all of history, I mean, despite in the Byzantine Empire, despite the average emperor coming to rule at like 27, most of them only reigned for 6 to 7 years because they were assassinated or sent into exile. That when you have a big empire with lots of money and military, there's all sorts of chicanery for people fighting over the Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Always has been, always will be. The places that are the most honest are small, and they don't have a lot to gain by trying to overthrow the Republic, and a lot to lose if they get caught. The risk-reward balance is off. Like, if you're trying to be the dictator of Luxembourg, it's like, well, what are you going to do? You may as well respect the boat, because getting in there, it's like, well, I can... from now on, we will only have tea imported from Spain. And that's the extent of what you could dictate.
Fascist.
Yeah, that's all you could do. Like, being the dictator of Luxembourg is not overly attractive.
No.
I mean, it is. I would take it.
Me too.
If any of the Luxembourgians want to install me as their ruler, I will do it, and you will have a great life. But I understand that, like, my ability to affect geopolitical politics is going to be small.
Maybe the Q-Telligence Agency can set us up with a coup later.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, or just, there's times in life there's times in history when the people just say, hey, you be the king.
Yeah.
You know Stephen Fry, the actor in Britain?
Mm-hmm.
His grandfather was offered the throne of Algeria.
Sweet.
For no reason. He just happened to be there at the time. And they were like, hey, you look handsome. Why don't you be the king? And he turned it down, actually. Because he didn't want to be with all that. So I've always admired that about Stephen Fry's grandfather. Stephen Fry, Hugh and Laurie was a good bit. Mm-hmm. But the British are ugly, but I do love their television.
I wouldn't mind being the king of Algeria. Albert Camus really painted a pretty picture of that place.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be bad. I don't know why he turned it down, but I mean, I guess because he knows that heavy is the head that wears the crown.
Yeah,
Sword of Damocles and all that, which is the best song in Rocky Horror Picture Show. I got the sword of Damocles hanging above my head. Yeah, so it was an apocalypse. A lot of things revealed. The Q is not real. Election's not real. What else was revealed to be not real? Oh, the news not real.
The COVID.
That was revealed. The COVID revealed to be not.
So a lot of things were a miracle. Right after the election, a week after the election, all the hospitalization rates started to roll off. That's on the CDC's
it's a
website.
Miracle!
It's an election miracle. Now, there's studies are starting to come out in the U.S. journal saying, oh, well, it looks like hydroxychloroquine works after all. That's kind of crazy. Who would have thought?
The PCR test is not valid.
Oh, yeah, the WHO said on Inauguration Day.
Now, just remember, you heard it here first. We said the PCR test was not real, and then on Inauguration Day, the WHO was like, yeah, it's
by the way, guys, PCR test totally prone to massive amounts of false positives and probably a false basis for this entire year of insanity.
Right. But see, this is why this kind of show is important, because yes, people are playing the Game of Thrones and they're doing nonsense, but if you realize that's what it is, it doesn't affect you that bad. Like, because I've known people, I'm sure we all do, that have been really terrified of the virus.
Mm-hmm.
And like, they self-police themselves, like they were always hand washing all the time and they stay inside and they don't, and they didn't go to Christmas. It's like, and I was just like rolling around, boop-a-doo, boop-a-doo, hello, I'm going, hey, the park's all for me today.
Mm-hmm.
And so really it was not bad, and if people freaked out about it, then I would, of course, keep my distance and say hello and, not want to freak them out or whatever. And I'd do 6 feet to not make them hysterical. But if you're walking around unafraid, you really had a pretty good time.
Yeah.
And so you can do, because look, this is what they do. Fear is the way they control you. That's the way everything works. It's like, oh, there's global warming. We all got to you all got to do all these things and pay these taxes and not buy this, but instead buy that because of the earth and the polar bears, and think of the penguins. And then they say, you don't eat the meat. And then they have this whole thing for that. And they say overpopulation's a problem. And you shouldn't do this. And you should try to live and buy the birth control pills. That way your wife can go to work and pay more taxes. And it'll be great. And then they'll be and then they do, and we're all over. It's going to be so bad, with so much overpopulation. And then, or there's AIDS. The AIDS is going to, everyone, if you just have sex, you're going to have AIDS. You have to choose between living or reproducing and dying, and then your baby will die of AIDS. Zika. I mean, every 6 months there's a new terror.
Yeah.
Sometimes
what were the 3 things? It was fear, guilt, and shame.
Fear, guilt, and shame.
Yeah.
And when you realize that's the game, you're like, oh, I see what you're doing. Hey, good on you. But you just go about your life. And then, because so much of it, they don't, just think about it. If they wanted to do like they just simply don't have the resources to like control everybody. They just simply, there's not the manpower. America is a huge place full of lots of people. And so most of the control relies on people self-policing. Like, you don't say this because they really want you to think they're listening all the time.
Yeah.
They want you to think the NSA, and in theory, can they plug in and listen all the time? Sure.
Yeah.
But also, it's petabytes and petabytes and petabytes of data a second of people speaking online, doing podcasts, doing videos, texting. No one's watching. They say, oh, we got AI bots. And they're like, what are they going to do? Look for the word bomb?
Yeah.
And people say, that's the bomb. And then it's like, well, that's like 9.99% of it is like slang.
And really, in reality, the way that stuff is used is if they already don't like you, and then they go back and they find the dirt.
Exactly. That's all. So they're not even really listening all the time. Like that's not. They want you to think that they're God with an eye in the sky, looking all at your actions, because then you self-police, and that's how they control you. But really, that isn't true. That's also fake. That's just another thing that is said. And as we've learned from Q, that people just say things that aren't true. And people will just say things. And that's why I don't really take people seriously a lot. Because people are like, hey, yeah, I was in the Special Forces. Like, really? Yeah, man, I was a Green Beret. Where'd you serve? Vietnam. Undercover. I blended in with the local population.
Yeah.
Aren't you black? Yeah, but wouldn't they notice? Yeah, but I wore makeup. I mean, people if you just listen to people's stories, they fall down. Like there's you were not a U.S. Special Forces undercover in Vietnam as a dark-skinned black man. You'd stick out like a sore thumb. They'd have to get like an Asian guy, or people are like, oh, yeah, I was, I got a lot of investments. I'm very wealthy. It's like, yeah, like I have a neighbor, and he's always talking about all these horse farms he owns.
Mm-hmm.
He's never there. Don't you have to take care of your horses? I got people. That's what he says. I got people. You got people just looking at you. Never go check on. I got people. That's not real. People just say stuff. They'll just say anything. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So most of what people say, and they just do it. A lot of it, some of it is they want to seem more interesting. Some of it is they want to raise their status by pretending to be something they're not. Some of it is just, a lot of it is just people are bored and they want to come up with things that are interesting to talk about. And all they have to talk about is that they watched Top Chef last night.
I mean, so modern technocratic life for most people is exceptionally boring.
Right. So they have to make up stories. And if they do it for long enough, they begin to think that there's some truth to it.
Yeah.
And then it's fine. I mean, that's just what people do. So when people talk, just don't, everyone now, their thing is like, oh, I had COVID. Almost died.
Yeah.
COVID. And it's I've seen you every week this year. You were not near death.
Well, some time ago, I worked as a lifeguard.
Uh-huh.
And most of the time it would go, you're telling these stories. It reminded me of a personal story of mine. Most days it would go pretty cool. The club was really chill, but there were some guys that came around. There's some bad dudes, and there's this one dude with his name was Corn Pop. And Corn Pop ran a bunch of bad dudes, and he came up to me with a chain and he said, I'm gonna choke you out. And then I pulled out a samurai sword and I said, well, Corn Pop, if you keep messing around, I'm gonna slice you into 5 equal parts. And then I did, and we had to close the pool.
Yeah. And so pool's closed due to AIDS.
Mm-hmm. From Corn Pop.
So were you around during the pool's closed due to AIDS?
No, I missed that.
That was my favorite 4chan thing. They got it. Everyone was like, let's just call our local pools and say that we have AIDS and we were bleeding in the pool. And they would be like, we're the county health commission. Yes, sir. We need you. We had a report that someone was bleeding in your pool and they were HIV positive. Oh, yeah. So we need you to close the pool for a thorough cleaning. Oh, sure. And make sure you put on the sign, pool closed due to AIDS. And they'd have this phone call recording, and the lady would be like, do I have to put due to AIDS? And they're like, yes, that's a county requirement.
Oh, no.
So the pool closed due to AIDS. And that's all. People just say things. It doesn't matter, but this was an apocalypse. And people get upset, especially religious people, when you say this is apocalypse. They think there can only be the one apocalypse, like the big one. But it's fractal,
Mm-hmm.
It's the same patterns repeating over and over again at various scales. And you're sort of always in it. It's always Bible times. It's always Genesis. Every day sun comes up just like it did for the first time. Grass grows again. New lion cubs are born. Eagles hatch. Every day. Also, every day is Judgment Day. I mean, think about all the symbols that have been with us on the national and international stage for the past few years. Like 10 Plagues of Egypt. Let's go. Flies. How many times recently did flies just appear on the faces of politicians? Like Hillary, Pence,
True.
Obama.
Yeah.
Like, why is that? Just fly. Beelzebub means Lord of Flies. Lord of Decay, sort of the same idea. Frogs, all right? Pepe the Frog, the MAGA people identifying with the frogs. The Plague of Frogs. Pestilence, check. That's an easy one. Thunderstorms of hail and fire. We had a lot of wildfires.
Mm-hmm.
West Coast, Australia, check.
We had bomb cyclones. Remember
yes.
that?
Flooding, which wasn't one of the things of Egypt, but it was a general plague. The hurricanes have just been, it's always Bible times. You're always in it. You're always in slavery, but trying to come out of slavery. You're always being delivered and fall. It's all the time. You know, that's why the Bible works. Is because it's a distillation of these big patterns. And if you follow, he's like, oh, I see where I am now. I see where I am. And sort of like sometimes you get stuck in a part. Like I've sometimes been stuck where I'm like in the book of Isaiah, just looking up at the skies at wheels upon wheels and going, woo, you know. And which is what UFO gazing is,
right?
So, but the veil gets torn off in these apocalypses, just unveiled, and like, there's nobody there, no plan, there's no government, there's no election, there's no virus, just pulling the veil off, and you realize that so much of the stuff is just. And I know people are like, now, Sumo, not everything is fake. And that's true. There are real things. But a lot of stuff is fake, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like I said, I don't know. My favorite is that maybe Q was a troll that got out of hand. Because you said you think it may be Pompeo. And he's a good candidate.
Pompeo or the Brits. Really, I'm leaning toward the Brits right now.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
They've already proven their treachery with regard to the Trump administration.
Yeah. So, but here's the way you get out of this, guys. Because people are like, "What do you do?" Like if everything's. Well, here's the secret. Okay.
All right.
I whisper. No, I'm not whispering. People get when you fight the narrative, you're still in the narrative.
Please elaborate.
Okay. Well, it's like in The Matrix, and The Matrix is a really profound set of movies. The reason it resonates so much with people is because it's true, and you can sort of feel the truth, like truth vibrates in you like a tuning fork. That's why language gives you away all the time. We say that rings true because it's like a tuning, like when you tell a lie, you can feel the lie. Yeah. Like it rings hollow. Like inside you feel like the negative energy.
Well, I think some people can. I know a lot of people that cannot, but...
Well, when you say lies enough, you deaden your conscience. That's true. And then it's like you have a dead tuning fork.
Or if you listen to them enough.
That's also true. Yeah. But like lies have an energy that's bad, right? And if you and so that's why when people say things that are true... You say it rings true because it's like, I don't really understand it, but it sort of makes sense, and I sort of get how that's working,
Uh-huh.
And so movies, to work with an audience, have to have some level of logos in them. Just like you can make a song that has a bad message, like, we need to all be prostitutes and kill people with guns or whatever. But you still have to follow the logos of melody, otherwise people won't listen. Right, so that has to have a part of the truth in it, right? And so even movies that are retroactively deemed to be transsexual allegories, which it isn't, that's also fake. I love
feel
the
like
way
they retconned that to like bring.
They did.
Keep the franchise relevant to the next generation of viewers.
It's just J.K. Rowling all over again. She's like, oh, Dumbledore was gay and Hermione was black. No, JK. No, you're just desperately still trying to remain relevant.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Like, people can never just be satisfied. Like, you're the richest woman in, like, ages. Just be happy.
Yeah.
You don't need people to constantly be looking at you all the time. But see, people that the money doesn't, you always need affirmation. You always need to feel like, oh, I'm still loved, right? That's what people really want. And I think money will make them loved. And sometimes it does, but she's like, oh yeah, she said this. She was like, oh yes, Hermione is black, and then you flip to the book and you read and you hit the page, and you put your finger down. And it says Hermione's white face, and then you point it out to her, and she's like, you're a racist. She
black
really
people
did that.
Can also be white.
And more than that, she had direct creative control over all the illustrations that made it into those books, and in every single one, Hermione's white. All of them. She shows that, and then she's like, Hermione's black. She's black! And you're like, no, JK, you're just trying to be woke after the fact. And also, there's no indication whatsoever that Dumbledore's ever gay. You just made that up.
Yep.
After the fact, she's just being cute. She's just saying stuff to stir the pot. Like, okay, in my novels, actually have lesbians in the book. 2, it's not explicit. 1, because I don't put anything explicitly sexual in my books because I try to keep it clean. And 2, because it's a book about talking animals in a dystopian sci-fi. And I didn't want to attract too many furries.
Yeah.
Right? Listen, furries, no H number 8. No hate. Okay. You're just a bit... I never wanted, if my book ever got popular, I never wanted any of my characters to end up as someone's fursona. That's all.
Yeah, awkward.
I didn't want anyone in a fursuit of one of my characters at like Midwest FurCon or TrotCon or whatever.
What if you did
Midwest
a signing
Fur
and
Fest.
they all showed up in their suits?
I mean, you can't choose your audience, right? Yeah. You can't. I mean, you just gotta take who's there. But
well, we know that's true.
But see, like, what my point is, I think in the book it's pretty obvious, because they're a female couple and they're fairly butch and they drive a semi truck together.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, pretty obvious. And also their mannerisms, but it wasn't like on purpose, if that makes sense. Like when I come up with a fictional character, I just sort of close my eyes and imagine the situation, and whoever sort of pops up out of my imagination as the most fitting, I just write in there, right?
Okay.
Not for any purpose. It's just like, oh, in this situation, of course they would be somewhat lesbianic. Right? Of course, the only women that make sense here, and for some reason I just felt like it had to be, it was like, are from a small island off the Greece.
Yeah.
It's the only, so I don't write it for any like reason other than like it just fits. But she's like, and my point is, when you write something like that, the characters in it, you can sort of tell. It's like, oh yeah, there's nothing at all about Dumbledore that's like, oh, he's gay.
Right.
He's like, there's no way she had that in mind at the time, or she would have wrote the character a little bit differently. Not a lot, just a little, and you would have been like, oh yeah, I could see that. But no, she's just making it all up, right?
Right.
But see, so the back to the Matrix, right? Even though it's supposedly a trans allegory, it's not. But what it is, it's a movie giving voice to the anxieties of a population facing the internet for the first time and sensing how encompassing computers would be and being worried about being stuck in it forever, which turns out was valid given the screen times as they are.
Indeed.
I mean, people are sort of stuck in the computer, right? It's about being stuck in a fake reality, which we are in many ways. And the narrative is the Matrix. The narrative... That's why it rings true for people, the movie, because at one point, like the architect says to Neo, who's the resistance leader, right? You're a necessary component of the Matrix. I tried to make a control system that accounted for everything, but I couldn't. But and Neo's the remainder, like the rounding error. What I needed for people to accept it was to feel like they had a choice to fight it. And then, even if they chose to fight it, they're still operating within it. And a lot of people just choose not to fight it because they feel like, well, it's not really slavery because I could walk away anytime I wanted. I just don't want to.
Yeah.
Right? Then that's like the ultimate control mechanism, is when you make people feel like they have a choice, but they really don't. Because you remember when Neo starts doing Matrix magic in Zion, supposedly outside the Matrix?
Yeah.
That's because they're in another level of the Matrix, see? They think they got out, but then Neo's realizing, oh wait, this is also fake and gay. And I gotta wake up again. Right? And that's what, so when you're fighting the narrative, so like right-wing people, because like here's the broad narrative. The left wing controls all the institutions and yada 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 and the culture and blah blah blah. Right. And so then people are like, well, I'm trad, I'm a frog, and I'm gonna burn, but you are necessary for the narrative to exist, because the narrative justifies itself that there are evil, deplorable people that want to send you back to the Stone Age of whatever and take away all the progressive things and make life horrible. And then so you're there, and your existence is necessary for the narrative to propagate. And your existence is dependent upon the narrative because you've defined yourself in opposition to it. Right? So that's, you're still in the Matrix, you're just on another level. And that lets people seeking a way out think they found it, and because of that, they're more of a slave than anybody. Right? Is that what I'm at?
I'm not really buying this.
Okay. Let me go on a little bit more.
Okay.
Because who's really outside of the Matrix? Who isn't stuck in it? Amish people.
Mm-hmm.
They just unplugged. They literally unplugged from the narrative. They unplugged from the screen. And all the goings on of what we're doing and fighting about is just, they're like, what? What are you talking about? Martial law? Save the children. I gotta farm. I gotta get the plow going.
So you're saying the only option that isn't opposition controlled is to walk away.
I'm saying you need to approach it in such a way that you understand that you're still playing. If you're fighting in the game, like, you can only resist the Matrix by plugging into the Matrix.
I mean, I get the idea. Like, the people that stormed the Capitol were playing the game. They were
exactly.
playing their role that was given them.
They were playing the role that was given them. Right. Exactly. And so many quote unquote people that are against it are just simply playing into the role given to them by the narrative. It's like, oh, you don't like that? Well, here you can be this.
Mm-hmm.
And set up. And that's why so many people adopt the taglines that are given to them. Like, they're not actually thinking for themselves. They're like, because people are like, oh, diversity is our strength. And other people are like, well, actually, homogenous societies are better, and we need to consider racial IQ. And it's like, but they all end up saying the same thing. Like, some people had the idea, but then the narrative latched on, like, this is the counter idea. And then you can have the idea, or you can have the counter idea. Which do you want?
Mm-hmm.
And so many people, that's why there's all these binaries that prop up where, like, everyone's like, Biden stole the election and Biden didn't steal the election. And what about the evidence? But you didn't look at the evidence. It's like, that's all. It may be true, but it's also, you're fighting within the established grounds that they've given you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And maybe, like I said, once you know that it's fake and you know the narrative's not real, you sort of come out of it. And the reason I bring up the Amish is because they're not plugged in, and they're also the most successful group in America. Like, both left wing and right wing accept the premise that brown people are going to outbreed white people, and America's going to become brown.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go, really? Have you looked at the Amish lately? You know, the Amish population is white, and they double in size every 20 years, which is crazy.
Wow.
It's insane. Every 20, they have about 8 to 9 children apiece sometimes, at least 6. And they all have tremendously long lifespans. The Amish have the most profitable farms per acre by a large margin, way more than Monsanto, way more than any other commercial farmer, and they do it with horse and buggy. And they work half the hours of the year. That, like, the normal, like, if you do 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, they do about half that on the farm. And they're way more profitable. They have longer lifespans, and they have way more kids. And so if you project it out and you include the Amish, it's like, because the Amish they're so outside the narrative, they're not even often on a lot of these population rolls. Like, a lot of them don't even have Social Security cards. They're just there. They never sign up for anything. They don't really, a lot of them don't have licenses. They don't, they're just there, and they're so outside the narrative, they're not even in the statistics. And you look around, and the Amish are just everywhere. Like, places that were used to not have any Amish at all are just covered in Amish now. Because every 20 years, there's twice as many of them. And so even the narrative of, like, what you're fighting over is not accounting for the people that aren't even in the Matrix at all.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I'm trying to get people to see is, like, even when you're fighting it, you got to say, like, oh, wait a minute, am I still in the Matrix? Because there's people that aren't even in the Matrix so much they're not even in the data set. And it's the only solution. You just got to get outside and walk around and meet people. Because then you see, like, how many people don't fit in these things, and, like, oh, there's actually a different picture painting. Like imagine how far in the narrative you got to be to listen to Joe Biden say democracy has prevailed to an empty lawn surrounded by soldiers. It's madness. Democracy has prevailed. And then boom, 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 in a side of Forbidden City.
Yeah.
You know?
Surrounded by a 12-foot wall. Right?
But, yeah. But see, and so it's just, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be involved in politics, or you shouldn't be, but you got to on some level, like, transcend these binaries. And then you come out of it and you feel a lot less anger and fear and hatred and all this stuff, because you're like, oh, right. It's even the picture they're painting that I'm resisting isn't real. Like, left-wing people are like, oh, there's these Nazis and there's the bang, and then there's a lot of right-wing people that are like, we're going to be swamped by immigration and all this stuff. And there is a lot of immigration. It is problems. And there are some real Nazis, though not very many, and all this stuff. But also, like, that there's so much not accounted for by the narrative that drawing any long-term conclusions is not valid. And a lot of these fears just poof into smoke. And
it kind of makes me think about it makes me think about like leaving the city and moving out to the country, and the way everything, the mindset is different. I was talking to somebody about this today with regard to masks and stuff. It's like where I live, if I go, I kind of live I live out in the country, but I go to the city a lot. And so when I'm in the city, you know, you're liable to get grief for not wearing a mask because you're the non-conformer, and conforming is very important in the city. And then, but when you move out to the country, it's a very laissez-faire kind of live and let live attitude with things like that. But you don't, the people that live in the city don't know. They don't know what's going on. I was explaining to my friend, I said, bro, 50 miles down the road, nobody's doing this. And,
I know.
And you don't even know that they're not doing it. He did actually know. But I mean, I'm using him as like a stand-in for a lot of people that are just focused on the mega city way of life, and they don't know what's going on. And your illustration of the Amish was like a whole new dimension to that thought.
Yeah, the Amish.
Which was really cool.
People do. There are fields of study called Amish studies in some universities, because they need to be studied because they're not in like statistics, because they never show up for things. They don't, as a general rule, vote. Some of them do, but a lot of them don't. They don't like sign up for licenses in most cases. They don't do any of the things that would get you on any database. Yeah. And yet they're thriving. From an evolutionary perspective of like which group reproduces the most and like lives the longest, it's the Amish hands down. Yeah. You know, they're beating everybody. And if they continue on this track, and like 90% of their kids raised Amish continue in the Amish lifestyle. Yeah. It has a very high retention rate because
which is huge. Like from somebody, you know, in over here in Protestantism, I mean, the retention rate, if you're pushing those numbers, I mean, that's incredible. That's awesome.
Well, it's because everyone's still in the Matrix, and it tells you all these things, and it's like, oh, well, if you're a Protestant and you're like in the country, then you're some hillbilly, and you don't want to be a hillbilly, do you? Yeah. Why don't you do yoga? And I'm not saying anything. And the thing is, once you're out of the Matrix, you can enjoy all these things without because I like yoga. I do it all the time. It's very good for you. I have a lot more mobility than I used to. My joints don't get as sore when I exercise, and all this great stuff. But I don't also feel like, therefore, I have to then be a Buddhist. Sure. You know? Yeah. And but I also feel like I can read Buddhism and not weird. Like, it's not contradicting, you know, my faith in anything. It's like, I'm just reading. It's like, that's interesting. They have some good ideas. It's nice, right? And so, because there are all these... the more you come out of the Matrix, the more things open up for you. And you're like, oh, right, that fear is not really even a thing. You know, and there are things to be afraid of. There are real bad things that happen. People like get actual cancer, and you can get into car wrecks and all this stuff. But so much of it is just like narrative and narrative and narrative and narrative, and like living into this narrative that other people hand you. But there's only one narrative that's real, and that's God's narrative. And it's like, you're a child of God and all these things, right? And it's ultimately good, even though there's badness in the world. And so it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. You know, I never tell you, my closest I've never been Amish, but they're Anabaptist. And for a while I would go to the Quaker service. which is also Anabaptist.
Yep.
Just in one of my phases of like, let's see what these people are doing. And the Quakers have two kinds of programs. They have, I didn't mean it, but they have programmed services and unprogrammed services.
Mm-hmm.
And a programmed service is like a traditional Protestant service where there's like a hymns and there's a sermon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the unprogrammed, which is what this was, I was not really prepared for, because I arrived and they're like, have a seat, and then we just sit in silence for an hour.
Yeah.
And we're all just sitting together. And every now and then someone would speak up. And I learned later that was like, they said like, if you feel the Holy Spirit driving you to say something, just speak up. And they would. And then afterwards we would have scones.
Huh.
And it was fine. I mean, everyone was nice. I got kicked out ultimately. I mean, not kicked out, but I didn't fit in very well because I was talking about how cops aren't ninjas. You know, because they would be in their meditation, you know, their group meditation of silence, and they'd be like, and I'm praying for who was the guy that George Zimmerman shot? Trayvon Martin. And I'm praying for Trayvon Martin's family, and I wish that the cops could learn non-aggression principles and maybe learn to shoot people in the leg instead of go for lethal blows. And then she'd be quiet, and then in the silence I would wait a minute and I'd say, but you know, cops are not ninjas and cannot hit moving legs very easily.
Yeah, I imagine that didn't go over well.
You know, just sort of like, that's my Holy Spirit moving me. Because I can't, whenever, that's a problem I have. I think I inherit that from my dad. My dad could never just let something that was not true just sit there.
Right.
He'd have to be like, no. Like and sometimes he was wrong and he'd admit it, you know, like, okay. But he could just never, like, a lot of the ways the wheels of society are greased is people just say nonsense and you're like, meh, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad was always like, wow, hold on a minute, you know, and I inherited that. And so when they're like, I'm like, well, that does, I mean, okay, police brutality may be a thing and whatever, but this idea that we could just shoot the gun out of their hand is crazy. You know? So I'd be like, you can't just do that. And then the Quakers got mad at me, but they gave me some scones.
Yeah. And
we departed as friends, but it wasn't for me. But you know, the Amish are not in the Matrix. A lot of the Anabaptists aren't in the Matrix. And you know who else is not in the Matrix? Travis Walton.
Who?
Look at that segue.
That's good.
Travis, he was. I figured we'd talk about him today because he showed up in the Joe Rogan Experience this week, and I thought he was dead. I hadn't thought about him in so long. I thought he was one of the first UFO abductee cases in 1975, and I just assumed he was dead. And then he showed up on Joe Rogan, and I was like, oh, he's still alive and doing his shtick.
Well, that's cool.
We should talk about him. Because I really thought, I was like, he was so long. I mean, I know 1975 for like people, it's like not that long ago, historically speaking, but he was just like the first one. He was the second. I could say there was Betty and Barney Hill was the first big abduction case, and then Travis Walton was number 2. And I mean, there were others, but they wouldn't receive like widespread media coverage.
Sure.
You know, Travis Walton was like he may be the biggest one. He may be bigger than Betty and Barney Hill. And I thought he's got to be, because he just seems like he comes from the golden era of UFOs, even though he's a little after it. And in my head, I was just like, oh, yeah, that's from a long time ago, and he's dead. But no, he was there, and he still had his red hair, which makes me distrust him because, you know, gingers 10 times more likely to join ISIS. And he was there. But I figured we'd talk about him because he was on the Joe Rogan, and a lot of people probably saw it. And you need to know about Travis Walton if you're going to be up on American Esoterica. So, you're not familiar with him at all?
No, man. This is totally fresh for me.
Okay, so the Travis
Walton. I was never really
case.
big into UFOs. Just
I
FYI.
know. I'm trying to correct that.
Yeah.
But you know, I've always just enjoyed people that were on the edges.
Sure.
Because they're just a lot more interesting. So he wrote this. Well, so here's his basic story. It was detailed in a book and accompanying movie, which was later made about it, called Fire in the Sky.
Oh, yeah.
Fire in the Sky, right? So in 1975, November, he was 22 years old and working as a logger in Arizona in a crew of 7. So besides him, there were 6 other people, and they all had the same testimony, okay? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot, because as we've seen with Q, people just make stuff up at random, and everyone goes along with it. Right? So that could be, you know, he could be like, hey, there's 800,000 Chinese troops in the Ontario border, in Ontario. And be like, yeah, I saw him. I saw him. I saw him this morning. And then we're like, really? It's confirmed. And then people would go, you know, and people just, I don't know, they just get caught up in the moment, you know? But these people saw, these 7 people, and they never really changed their story at all. You know, it was typical when you lie, you change it. But their story's been very consistent. So basically what it was they were out cutting down trees for the National Park Service. They needed to clear some spots. And they were in this company that won a bid with the Park Service to go do it. So they were out in Arizona cutting down trees. And they, while they were there, they finished up for the day. They all rode in one car. And they piled in, and 4 of them rode in the back. Or 5 of them rode in the back. Then there was the driver. I think his name was Mac or Mike, something like that. And then Travis rode in the passenger seat. And it was, the sun had set, and it was a lovely desert, you know, Arizona night. And they were just driving back. And as they're driving along, Travis has his window rolled down a little bit, and he's looking, and he sees this glow out in the woods. And at first he thinks, oh, it's the sunset. And he goes, wait a minute, no, the sun already set. Oh, it must be some campers? Maybe they have a fire? Or no? Yes. And then as they get closer, it gets brighter, and it looks more and more strange, you know? And they get there, and then they turn around a corner until they come to this valley, and 80 yards away, not quite a full football field, is a glowing disc, just sort of tree height in the air. And the whole valley is bathed in this sort of soft golden light. And most people then would say, whoa, and just sort of look. But Travis, for whatever reason, felt the need to run out and get a closer look at it. So he throws open the door. He runs down through the valley to get closer and closer to it. And then it just starts getting louder and like making like humming noise, like you know. Everyone's getting freaked out, and the guy's like, come back, get back, let's go. And so he is about to run, but then he gets a little afraid because it's glowing brighter. And so instead he tries to dive behind some brush and some logs. And when he goes to dive to hide, it's been depicted in some of the, I think in the, if I remember the movie correctly, or at least in some of the depictions, it's been depicted as like a tractor beam coming down and grabbing him.
Mm-hmm.
But really, everyone described it as more like a bolt of blue lightning, like zaps him. And he flies back like 15, 20 feet into the brush, lands on his side, and just lays there unconscious. And the other men just drive away like bats out of hell. Just terrified. And Travis has come to think, when he thinks about it now, he says he doesn't think it was an attack. He thinks that they were some sort of, he thinks that he sort of got into the field somehow and like basically arced the electricity off it, like static charge.
Okay, yeah.
Right, boom. And he thinks maybe that's why the aliens, came to check on him. Like, is this guy okay? Did we just kill this guy? You know? So, the guys in the truck zoom away, and they come back because they realize, hey, we gotta go. We can't let Travis just be killed by a UFO. That'll look bad if we don't do anything. Right. So they all go back, and they have one flashlight between them. And they go back, and the thing isn't there anymore. And so they all sort of huddle together. And they later sort of denied it out of macho-ness. But early on, they were like, most of us were crying. We were weeping because we were like freaked out so much. And this guy had died. And like we were like one guy collapsed in hysterics because it was so otherworldly. And they were just all huddled together in the dark with their one flashlight. And they go to where Travis had fallen. He's not there. And they think maybe he crawled into the brush to get away. They look everywhere. Nothing. So they go back to the city. They get on the payphone. They call the sheriff and they tell him what happened. And initially, of course, this is a big problem because the police think the most likely scenario is these 6 guys killed Travis and then came up with this story as a cover.
Mm-hmm.
So now all these guys are murder suspects. And it is a big problem for them. And the days go by, and there are these big manhunts out there. There are several hundred people, officers and park rangers, all looking for Travis. None of them. And as days go by, word gets out to the local UFO people, and they start sending people there. Like APRO is there, the Association for or the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO, which is now disbanded. But it was a big thing back in the day. And they've sent their researchers, and they're interviewing Travis's family and all this stuff. And one part that always stuck out to me was the sheriff goes to tell Travis's mother that her son, she's a single mother of 6. She had 6 children. And they go to tell her that her son is missing, and the story that the people were with him said is that a UFO zapped him with a bolt of lightning and then took him away. And the chief in his notes, the police chief said in his notes, writes, she was surprisingly unconcerned about this. just like, oh, really? Well, isn't that something? And that always struck me as
Travis is always getting into a scrape.
That Travis is always into something. And that always has struck me as like, there's a suspicious bit there.
Okay.
Something's up with the mother, which I'll come back to. So they do that. And the thing pretty much is going towards they're going to try to charge these guys with murder, right? That's where it's going. This is the direction it's heading. And Travis has 2 brothers. One of them believes the story because he's also seen a UFO before, and so he's more apt to believe it. But the other one's like, they killed him. I think the brother's name was Don, and he's like, they killed him, and he goes out there, and he spends like day and night searching through the brush where these guys were, thinking they've cut down some logs, they've hidden my brother underneath them or something. I'm going to find his body and prove it. So 5 days go by, and then in the middle of the night, Travis's sister gets a call to her house, and her husband, Travis's brother-in-law, picks up the phone. And on the other end is a very confused, hysterical Travis. He's calling from a payphone. He's like, I need you to come pick me up. I need you to come pick me up. There were these creatures. They were white skin, and they were creatures, and I was on the thing, and they were tall, but some of them were, and they were really light, and he's like that, right?
Yeah.
And so they come and they pick him up and they bring him back, and Dwayne, the brother that believed the story, is like, this is this part in the story where you think, here's another element where it could be suspicious, but also maybe not, given the circumstances. He sees his brother and he decides, I cannot subject my brother in this state to police inquiry and all the public fanfare that will follow.
Mm-hmm.
He's fragile. He's like, according to them and Travis's own testimony, he was almost catatonic for 2 weeks.
Wow.
Right, just in a complete state of shock. He'd lost, in the 5 days he'd been gone, he'd lost about 10 pounds. And he just was looking sort of rough. He wasn't injured in any way, but he was psychologically broken.
Yeah.
And one of the APRO people had gotten to Dwayne and said, listen, if he shows up, we have people specialized in this stuff. And you bring him out to us, we'll have a medical doctor for him, a psychiatrist and all that. And he thinks, okay, I got to get him. These guys know what to do. Because Dwayne believes in UFOs. He knows about. And Dwayne says, my brother needs the specialist, the psychologist that knows about this before he talks to anybody else. So he drives him down the road to the big city, I think it was Phoenix, to go see the APRO specialists. And he doesn't tell the cops like he should have. But this is a problem because we know that phone call that Travis made from the phone booth was real and not manufactured, because he dialed collect, and the phone operator, was of course listening to the call, as is what happened in those days, and she knew about the Travis being missing and notified the police about it.
Oh, okay.
So we know that he did, in a discombobulated state in the middle of the night, 5 days later, make this call to his sister. And so the police know something is up, and they begin looking around, and eventually they find that he's in Phoenix, and the brother initially tries to lead them off again and says he's in a different city in this private hospital, but eventually they catch up to him, and they're like, he's like, well, listen, he was just really broken, and I wanted him to have a psychiatrist. I didn't want him to say anything that he could incriminate himself with if anything did happen. But here's the problem, is the APRO people, as so many UFO people do, if anyone ever tells you, I am a doctor that specializes in the psychological cases of abduction cases, just run away. That person is a crazy quack. In almost every case. If you're a psychologist that specializes in recently abducted people, you don't listen to that person. So what he does is he puts Travis is still at this point mostly catatonic and mostly just mumbling about creatures flying in the air, light, being attacked or attacking,
Mm-hmm.
And no coherent story is coming out of Travis's mouth. So they said, we're going to calm him down. We're going to put him under hypnosis, and then we're going to ask him what happened. The problem is hypnosis as a memory recovery tool is at best dubious, and it probably doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
We know that now. We've tried it a lot. Hypnosis is real, and it's weird, and I don't understand it fully. I've seen people be hypnotized, and a lot of the things they advertise can work. Like you can say, like, anytime you hear a bell ring, you'll want to have a peanut butter sandwich, and that will happen. And it's very strange. A lot of the hypnosis stuff can and does work. And you can hypnotize people even when they're not thinking about it. That's what propaganda is and what advertising is a lot of times, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as a memory recovery tool, dubious, because it's been found that under hypnosis, if you ask people questions, they will just pull a cue and start making stuff up. Like your brain will just start filling in the gaps like you're in a dream state.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, and then what happened? And your brain is like, oh, well, this. So the thing is, Travis's story comes out of a hypnotic memory regression scenario. What we know happened is that he disappeared for 5 days in this logging thing. He came back calling on the telephone in the middle of the night, having lost 10 pounds, apparently not having, really eaten anything since or whatever, and is just mumbling about creatures and being abducted and taken away somewhere, right?
Right.
That is what we know happened. The rest of this story comes out of hypnotic regression, which is very dubious. Might be true, but also questionable. And the story goes like this. When Travis was zapped by the bolt of lightning, the next thing he remembers is waking up on a raised table in a small room, and he raises his head, and there are 3 classic gray aliens there.
Mm-hmm.
But they're more pale white than gray in his version, right? And he feels something in his head he describes as squirmy or squirrely. And in the retrospect, he says, I think they were trying to telepathically communicate with me and I couldn't pick it up. Like they were trying to calm me down, because he said he sees them and his body kicks into, oh no. He's like, I feel like I've been mortally wounded. This zap has hurt me, right?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't leave an injury, but I'm tired and I feel weird and I'm very weak. And I see these things coming at me, and they're basically these monstrous creatures. And he says, I go into fight or flight mode. He says, in the movie, they like attack at me a little bit. Didn't happen. I was the only aggressor. I jumped up off this table. I shoved one back with my front arm. And it was a weak shove. I was stumbling. I was disoriented. It wasn't much of nothing. But the creature fell backwards with surprising ease. Almost as if he didn't weigh like more than like a child.
Wow.
Just fall backwards. And I then stood up and I just reached around the room and my hand landed on something and I picked it up and started swinging it. And I came to see what I was swinging was this clear sort of glass cylinder or pipe or maybe a rod. And I'm just swinging it at them. And I'm screaming profanities, and I see behind them there's this door, and I want to get to the door. I don't know where it goes. I just want to get out the door, and I want to get away. And I'm swinging, and I'm screaming, and they just back off through the door. And I can't get past them because I don't want to rush them. But I'm still afraid. But they're backing away, and so I'm sort of backing off. So they disappear for a while, and I'm just sitting there terrified and panting, and like, what is going on? A few minutes later, in comes a very handsome man. Very handsome man in a blue uniform. Just sort of like, imagine a doctor's blue scrubs, but tight.
Okay.
Because in a staple of UFO reports is if there's ever a humanoid alien seen, it's always extremely attractive. Why? I don't know. There's often an element of homoeroticism. I don't think so in Travis's case. But like in Ingo Swann's case, when he remote viewed the blue men working on the moon and they were all ripped and nude, just shoveling and like, heave-ho on the moon, look at her muscles. Like, that was a bit, and he named his book Penetration. A lot of homoeroticism there. And in other things. Like, and the Venusian women that often show up in these stories are extremely well endowed in the chest.
Mm-hmm.
Almost always. Right?
Well, low gravity environment,
Exactly. But I think the larger thing is that the humanoid aliens are always depicted as sort of Edenic or like paradisical, like what the perfect human form would be.
Mm-hmm.
So they're always very handsome or very pretty. They're in top physical condition without even really trying. They're just look great. And so this guy comes in Travis's notes. He's like, he first sees this guy and he's like, this guy is like, first of all, strange. He looks a little otherworldly, but he's also like incredibly handsome. Just like Fabio just walks in like, hello, I see you on my UFO. But the guy doesn't speak. No one speaks to him at all. Like he said, he noted that the Greys never changed any facial expression whatsoever. Which he said, which if you think about it, makes sense. If they are telepathic, you wouldn't need to like smile or frown. Because you just beam the emotion into the other person's head, right? But this guy also doesn't talk. He does smile. And he says, in retrospect, I think maybe this was like it was maybe either a mind projection or maybe it was some sort of synthetic human. I felt like it was something that they needed to give me something familiar so I would stop freaking out.
Right.
Like, oh, here's another human like you. Come on. So the guy doesn't say anything, and he just grabs Travis gently by the arm. He starts walking, and Travis follows him like, okay, we're going out the door. That's where I wanted to go. And they go out the door, and then out of another door, and then down a ramp, and they're back in the forest. He said, the UFO is behind me, and in front of me. We start walking across the forest floor, and in front of me is another larger ship, or maybe a building. I don't know. It's some big structure. It was cylindrical, and we go inside, and it's like a hangar, and there are more UFOs. And then I go, and there's this other room we walk into, and there are all these other people, just like this one. There's men and women, all of them incredibly beautiful, wearing the same kind of uniform. And I start asking them questions like, where are we? What's going on here? And none of them answer me. They all just sort of stare at me and smile. And I get panicked again. And I'm like, something is wrong. these are not real people or something. I don't know. I start fighting back again, but there were like 20 of them, and they were all ripped, and I was been shot by a lightning bolt. So they didn't have much trouble restraining me. And they hold me down on this table, and this one of them brings would look like almost like a gas mask, and she puts it over my face, and that's the last thing I remember. I said, then I woke up, and I was on the asphalt, and it was cold, and I look up over my head, and I see a light, and like a little craft, just sort of beaming over me, and the light shuts off, and then it's gone, and I sit up, and down the hill from me is my hometown. And I run down and get the payphone, and I call my sister. And that is the story. Oof. But as I say, that story comes out of hypnotic regression. All we really know is that he disappeared for 5 days. The people that were with him said that he got struck by a UFO, and then that he came back babbling incoherently. Right? And so, there's so much problems with hypnotic regression that you really... It's very hard to trust any of that to me. But, it could be. It could be. But we do know that he's missing for 5 days. We do know that he had these physical traumas, or not physical, but psychological traumas appeared to be real. They did blood work on him and MRIs, and they found strange mental patterns in his fMRI, Mm-hmm. And so ever since then, people be like, well, this is like the case. This is like the guy that was like with aliens. Okay. Did it happen? Here's the problems. One, the idea of like, the business plan of pretending you've been in contact with aliens and selling a book about it and going on a speaking gig tour was well established at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like contactee books are all the same. I was contacted by aliens. There were these beautiful creatures. They were usually blonde, sort of Nordic-looking people. And they all have this message of love and light. We're going to raise human vibrations, and we're very concerned about nuclear weapons. That's like every contactee book in a nutshell. Because it's coming at a time when contactees start around the nuclear bomb era, and people have a lot of anxiety about it. And so there's all these stories of like people coming down from the stars saying, don't blow yourselves up. Choose the path of light instead. We listen to us. We wear these long flowing robes.
Sounds legit.
Sounds legit. I would listen to someone that came from the sky wearing a long flowing robe. Especially when they're saying something as sensical as don't blow yourself up with a bomb.
Yeah.
But what makes Travis is different is he's really the only one that, when the Greys enter into the story, they become, the Nordics are always nice and love and light, and the Greys always have an element of abduction, force, taking people against their will.
Yeah.
So did he just was this just a book grab? That's why I said the mom thing, because maybe he just went to his mom's house, if you want to be cynical, and he just stays there for 5 days, comes back to complete the hoax to sell the book. Because he did write a book that made decent money. I mean, for a UFO book, you can't get rich on a UFO book, right? Unless you're Whitley Strieber in Communion, and then you can make like a decent paycheck, but not rich.
Right.
So he could have done that. Could have just been a completely cynical. But if it was, he was a very good actor. And so were his companions. Because they all sold the story pretty well. Like he really acted like he was catatonic for 2 weeks, which is difficult.
It would be tough to hold that thing together with nobody ratting on you.
Exactly. Especially under police interrogation and all this stuff. And for not much money. I mean, the business model was established, but it was also established that this is something you do for like a little bit of side income and some attention. Not for like to become Bill Gates, right? So possible that he hoaxed it. That the mother thing has always stuck out to me as like, why was she sort of like, oh, golly gee, Travis went away on a spaceship. Oh hum. That makes sense if he's just in the basement. And she's trying to play it off, right?
Right.
But then the mother has to be like, it's this very complicated thing. I mean, maybe, like as we've seen, people will just say stuff. Maybe, right? Okay,
and sometimes people, when they get something really weird thrown at them, they don't react the way you think they would.
100% true also.
Yeah.
Like if you... I don't know, if you're... like, just imagine, listener, if your, like, dad or your brother came to you and said, hey, last night I was taken by a spaceship. What would your reaction be? You'd be like, oh, really?
Well,
really?
Tell me
more. Right. Like, I mean, you wouldn't be... It's hard to know how to react to something that's outside. Like if they said, I have cancer, you'd know how to react. If they said Aunt Phyllis died, you'd know how to react. If they said Aunt Phyllis died and left us a lot of money, you'd know how to react, right? But if they said, I got taken by a spaceship, I don't know. I don't know what to feel, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, there was this show called The Moment of Truth on Fox. Do you remember this show?
Is that with Shatner?
No.
Is he the host of that?
No. It was out.
I'm thinking of something else.
It was not out for long, like 1 or 2 years, 2008, 2009, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And essentially, it was a game show where they took someone with a crazy claim and hooked them up to a polygraph, or a lie detector, and asked them questions. And it was sort of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Like you every time you answer a question truthfully, you would go up in the prize money, and you could walk away at any time you wanted. But if you ever got a lie, you lose it all.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
Okay. And there were 15 questions, and you had to answer them all truthfully. And if you did, you got $25,000. But if the machine ever said, that is a lie, then you'd lose, right? So Travis goes all 15 questions. He's on this show.
Oh.
Yeah, right. All 15 questions. And the first couple of questions in every show are just like calibration questions, like, are you really from so-and-so? True. Yes, that is true, right? Is your name really Travis? Yes. True. Boom, boom, boom. And then in between, they fill it with all this like filler talk and like, you know, before they put him to the test. Wasn't a very good show, honestly. The Travis one was interesting, but so all these questions are around the incident for the first 14. Like, do you believe there is evidence that you've been abducted by aliens? And he was like, yes. That answer is true, according to the polygraph. Do you wish one of your friends had been taken instead of you? And he's like, oh, sometimes yes. And that answer is true. Did this UFO incident ruin your life? And he's like, oh, yes, sometimes I think it did. True, right? And so he gets 14 of them true, and his wife is there, and his daughter, and his son, and his friend. And they're in the audience, and they get up to the last question for the $25,000. It says, the question pops on the screen. Were you abducted by a UFO on November 5th, 1975? Travis says yes. And the computer says, lie.
Interesting.
And he just sort of smiles and shakes his head and says, no way, no way. And to me, his reaction to the lie was more telling, because polygraphs are not really reliable.
Right.
Not at all. They're not admissible in court. They used to be, but they're not, because it works on the theory that when you tell a lie, you'll have a fight or flight response that causes physical arousals, like heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, skin conductivity goes up.
Yep.
How fast your breathing goes up, right? And that's all it really measures. All it shows really is that when you're answered, you're physically excited. But if you answer at the time when you're like sexually aroused or frightened, or if someone is threatening you, or if you're just saying a thing that's an uncomfortable truth and you're worried about how people will receive it, those will also have the same types of physical arousals.
Yep. So
it doesn't really mean anything. Like they used to think, but like as it's been pointed out, like the American psychiatric people were like, you know, an honest person may be nervous when answering truthfully, and a dishonest person may not be nervous at all when lying. You know, like we said, some people lie as easy as they breathe. So it doesn't really mean much that he failed this. To me, it's a little telling that he got 14 right, and then the big one, he got wrong. But more telling is his response to it being wrong. Like, he wasn't like I would be a little more angry, like, no, it is true, it is. And he's like, well, you know, you win some, you lose some. And his wife, just her jaw drops. She's like, because she's been living with this for 30 years at this point.
Right.
And it's like, you've been telling me. And he's like, no, it really is true. I know the polygraph. You know, that, which is the greatest moment on that show, is him looking at his wife and she feeling this betrayal.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's tough. Like I said, he is a redhead, so ISIS.
Do they really join ISIS at a higher rate?
Oh yeah, redheads they join ISIS like 10 times more than other hair colors.
Well, they get picked on a lot.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But so that's the Travis Walton case. He was on Joe Rogan. I was like, oh, that guy's still alive? We should talk about him.
That was interesting. I never really heard his story before. That was cool. Yeah.
So Travis Walton, make up your own minds about what happened. Something did happen to the man. He was disappeared for 5 days. He did come back in a apparently psychiatrically damaged state. Was he just acting? I don't know. Did something really happen? If something did happen, was it a UFO? Who knows? Who knows? But
the truth is out there.
So I've been waiting to use that. I've been waiting for you to push that button.
Feels good though sometimes to push the button.
Yeah. So
well, shall we wrap it? Is this our show? Is there anything else you wanted to cover tonight?
I don't think so. It's been fun. I think everyone's probably in bed now after watching the Penguins die.
Okay. Well, I liked the energy, the Friday night energy. We should do it an evening show again.
You know we'll never grow old together, 'cause you'll never grow old to me. It's a song about a vampire. Yeah, good stuff. Everyone out there, it's gonna be fine. Just don't do anything dumb. Don't fall for the Matrix. Don't fall for the Matrix. Smokestack is offering you a red pill. And I'm offering you a blue pill.
Which one makes you Amish?
It's like a brown pill with dirt. It's like a dirt capsule. And that makes you Amish. You can't be overly fancy because they can't have buttons.
Take the alfalfa pill.
Which is why Amish are not very good in the intelligence agency, because they don't even have buttons, let alone ones they're reverse threaded.
They don't have buttons?
No, they think it's too fancy. They think it's a prideful sin.
So they use zippers? Like what?
They just I think they just have ties, like I think like strings that tie.